to foreign policy. And Tim Walz, we will start with you. At what point will we know, or will you know, that Iraq can handle its own security and troops can come home? Do you support a definitive timetable, an arbitrary timetable, or do you prefer to take a wait-and-see when Iraq can handle its own security?
No, I've been from the beginning on this. If you create a dependency state, you don't set the benchmarks that needed to be there. I was talking about benchmarks 4 years ago. Now, of course, the Maliki administration in Iraq and President Bush are talking about those same things. Our military has performed brilliantly. They won their part of the war. They did what they needed to do. It was the failed leadership of the Bush administration that didn't take into consideration the sectarian violence, the absolute lack of being any connection with 9/11 or the true problem, which now sets in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We need to make sure we're drawing down our forces, because right now we don't have a single active brigade in this country that is fully combat ready. We need to make sure that we're focusing on the true threat, which is al-Qaeda, nuclear proliferation, Iran, and we've strengthened Iran by these policies. We need to pull down. The Iraqis said they're ready for it. We need to transition out in a safe manner.
Thank you very much. Greg Michelson.
We should leave immediately. Mission was accomplished. We captured Saddam Hussein. That was the mission of our goal, is to get him out of power, and I don't see what a victory would be. What are we looking at for a victory? I would like to see in detail what people are looking for a victory. I think we've accomplished victory, and it's time to leave. Let them build their country back. It took us 13 years for us to get our democracy going in America after we declared our independence, and they need some time too, and I think we're just muddling in their affairs, and they can do a fine job just like we did in establishing democracy in their own country.
And Brian Davis.
No, I would be against a timetable for withdrawal of troops from Iraq. However, I do like to see us get to a situation, would like to see us get to a situation where we could withdraw safely. And that would be by asking the people in Iraq to have a referendum and ask the question, do you want the U.S. military to stay or to go? If they ask us to go, we can leave with our heads held high, that we tried to do something very productive by putting together, by helping start a democracy, a place where people have been skeptical a democracy could start. If they tell us to stay, then we should negotiate on how we would stay there. We've had troops in Japan for over 60 years. That's a democratically elected government, one democratically elected government to the other. Have some troops there, smaller footprint out of the urban areas, and protect the sovereignty. Could be a force for stability, and have them pay for some of the cost.
All right, thank you all for those responses. Let's talk now about Iran and North Korea. Greg Michelson, we'll start with you. Both of these countries do pose a potential nuclear threat. Not just to the United States, but to really the stability of the world. How do you think the United States should handle the threat from North Korea and Iran?
Well, I think we put these countries on the defensive when we call them axis of evil and are concerned about what they're doing with their country. I think we need to work more closely with them somehow in trying to work out our problems and potential problems. I don't see them as the threat that the rest of the world, or that we're looking at them as a threat. And I think we need to work through negotiations and try and work out the problems and work for a better world.
All right, Brian Davis?
I think with regard to North Korea and Iran, that it is not in our interest or the interest of freedom-loving peoples around the world that either of these countries would possess nuclear weapons. We need to approach this through diplomacy first. This has to be bipartisan. This has to span administration to administration. We could also consider economic sanctions second. But particularly with the case with Iran, it would be unacceptable if Iran possessed nuclear weapons. We have to take that into consideration. They've called for the destruction of Israel. I absolutely support the right, the state of Israel to exist. We cannot allow with the current government of Iran to possess nuclear weapons.
And Tim Walz.
Well, both these countries were strengthened under the reckless policies of the Bush administration. Dr. Davis has on many cases compared President Bush to Harry Truman, stated that his policies were right. We've recklessly given Ahmadinejad a position he should have never had. We've isolated our position in the world and pulled our allies back. We need to re-engage. We need to make sure that the allegiances and the alliances that we're building are incredibly strong. Iran with a nuclear weapon is absolutely unacceptable. Their influence on Hezbollah and Hamas can't be there. All roads to this solution by isolating Iran is to go through Jerusalem, take the issue of the Palestinian-Israeli issue off the table, making sure then that the animosity that's created throughout the Middle East is stabilized. We can focus our attention on what I've been speaking about for years is the Northwest Territories of Pakistan and Afghanistan, where we need to make sure that we're stopping the growth of terrorist organizations there, and that's where we can focus.
All right, final question now in this segment, and Brian Davis, it will go to you. In the war in Iraq, has it caused the United States to take its eye off of Afghanistan in the hunt for Osama bin Laden and others responsible for the attacks on 9/11?
You know, I really think that that's an excuse in explaining this. We need to be active both in Iraq and in Afghanistan. You know, over a year ago, Mr. Wallace was very outspoken against the surge, that it wouldn't work. Many people in his party were saying the same thing and weren't giving credit to our commanders on the field. They were being funded by MoveOn.org, an organization that put an advertisement in the New York Times that was insulting to our commander, General Petraeus. This isn't something that's productive and helpful. So the surge worked, and those people that were outspoken against it need to say, yes, we were wrong. So we need to do the same thing in Afghanistan, all the while considering over the longer term that we want to move out of there through a referendum process once it is more stable, as Iraq is very stable now. Who would have thought at this point in time that Iraq would be the stable country and Afghanistan wouldn't?
And Tim Walz.
Yes, it is distracting, and the commanders know. When I was in Afghanistan several months back, we can't even get our NATO allies to provide the helicopter coverage for our wounded veterans to be moved out of there. This issue of distracting from us, Dr. Davis mentions the New York Times article on General Petraeus. I know General Petraeus. I've met him on several occasions. On the morning as that ad ran, I was the first member of Congress to take to the media. I was on Fox News talking about I didn't agree with that, and I will take great exception as a 24-year veteran. And I'm the highest-ranking enlisted soldier that has ever served in Congress. Dr. Davis has just said he believes we should leave when the Iraqis, the ones who have blown us up, the ones who have done this, vote to do that. I've been to too many funerals in the 1st District to an Iraqi to decide what we're going to do with our policy. I was elected to deliver it, and that's exactly what I'll do.
All right. Greg Michelson?
Yes, we did take our eye off the target, which was Afghanistan and Osama bin Laden. That's where we should have been. That's where we should have stayed. And it's been a long time. We should have been able to capture him by now. Moving into Iraq, where had nothing to do with 9/11. We were told that it had weapons of mass destruction. We haven't found them. You know, there was no reason to go in there, and we should be leaving immediately. So, yes, we took our eye off the target there. We need to focus on finding Osama bin Laden and continuing that process and get out of Iraq immediately.
All right. Thank you all for those responses. We are going to move on to our next portion of the debate here in just a moment.